Do you walk around feeling anger or hatred or fear of people who believe they're born in the wrong body?
Absolutely not.
Do you harangue those people, abuse those people, tackle them?
No, but obviously the term transphobia is so broad now that it even applies to just stating the fact that your sex is your sex and that can't be changed. Of course, I feel empathy, or at least sympathy, towards people with gender dysphoria.
Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be discussing the case of Connie Shaw, a 20-year-old undergraduate student at the University of Leeds, who has been suspended from her position as head of daytime programming at Leeds Student Radio, LSR, due to her gender-critical views. This suspension followed a complaint about her conduct, specifically her social media activity, and an interview she conducted with a detransitioner for her podcast series. The Free Speech Union, FSU, has voiced their support for Shaw, arguing that her treatment raises important concerns about free speech and inclusivity on university campuses. But before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our growing community. So, without further ado, have a watch.
I'm so delighted to welcome to the studio Connie Shaw, who is a university student at Leeds University, and you were, until very recently, very much involved in the Student Union Radio. What happened and why are you on the naughty step?
Well, I was the daytime editor at Leeds Student Radio, but I also started my own podcast in September, and I'm gender critical, and I wanted to talk about gender ideology.
Explain what gender critical means for people who, frankly, have got lives and families and jobs to be getting on with.
So, gender critical refers to the idea that sex is real and immutable, and gender is made up and false.
So men can't become women, women can't become men, really basic stuff that pretty much 99% of the population knows to be true.
Essentially.
Yeah. So you had a podcast?
Yes,
you
and
talked about these views?
The second episode of my podcast, I interviewed a detransitioner, and there was quite a bit of backlash from students. People said that it was just far right, and that, you know, would you defend a rape advocate if they were to have a sensible conversation? That was a comparison that one person said.
Would you defend a rape advocate?
Yes.
Was the same as talking to someone who had transitioned gender, regretted it, and had tried to return back to their previous one? OK, interesting comparison.
Yeah.
You also interviewed Graham Linehan.
Yes. And then the day after that interview of Graham came out, he also published an article that I wrote for his Substack. And then the day after that, I was told that I had been suspended from Leeds Student Radio.
For the heinous crime of...
I'm not sure. They said that I had been accused of misconduct, such as putting the health and safety of other members at risk, of not acting in a duty of care, and putting LSR into disrepute.
Look, this leads to Student Radio.
Yeah.
So... they just said, look, basically, you're not involved in the radio anymore. This is it, you're out.
Well, no, the investigation...
There's an investigation?
Yes, the investigation went on for a month. And
what were they investigating?
Well, I wasn't actually sure the entire time, because I was told the investigation was not about my rights to hold and say gender-critical views.
Because those, of course, are protected legally.
Yes,
Maya Forstadt, we have her to thank for that.
Yes.
Stating facts is actually legally protected in this country.
But they also asked me, how do you maintain an inclusive environment at LSR when your choice to publicly post your views makes some feel unincluded?
Right.
So,
did they worry about you feeling that you might be unincluded by the fact that you understand facts?
It didn't come across to me in the interview that that was the case. Although I have been offered help for reintegration to the society, because I'm still able to return as a member, but I'm not allowed to continue in my committee position.
And there has been a suggestion that you could perhaps offer an apology.
Yes, they said that if I want to run for committee again, I can only do this if I provide a written apology to the wider membership and take mandatory training.
Do you walk around feeling anger or hatred or fear of people who believe they're born in the wrong body?
Absolutely not.
Do you harangue those people, abuse those people, tackle them?
No, but obviously the term transphobia is so broad now that it even applies to just stating the fact that your sex is your sex and that can't be changed. Of course, I feel empathy, or at least sympathy, towards people with gender dysphoria.
Over the issue of Israel and the like. But this is across the board in every university,
yes,
isn't
and
it?
in fact, I've had private messages from people not just at Leeds but at universities across the country telling me that this has happened to them as well, for very similar situations, for having gender critical views. So my case is not an isolated incident, and it's reflective of the state of freedom of speech. It's specifically about sex and gender at universities.
And exactly, and again, this is very ties in with Maya Forstadt, who had to go all the way to the top court in the land to get a ruling to show that yes, gender critical views, i.e. stating facts. Let's call it what it is: stating facts about sex. should be protected beliefs in this country. The fact that anyone even had to go to court over that is extraordinary. But in all of these cases, it's not you're not going up and abusing people. You're not making people feel uncomfortable by just being rude to them. You're simply stating very politely and perfectly respectfully in an article or in a podcast your views on factual matters that impact you as a woman, and they impact me as a woman, anyone listening here. And you're being accused of almost like, say, a thought crime.
Yes, it would seem that way.
What's been the reaction of your friends and many others? Are people supporting you publicly, or have people sort of gone, whoa, she's going to be cancelled, I'm getting the hell away from her?
Well, the online reaction from the public has been overwhelming, and I never expected something like this to happen.
Well, J.K. Rowling retweeted an article you've written about this.
Yes. Support from people at uni has been private. I'm not aware of any public support, but that's fine. If I'm any example to go by, I understand why someone wouldn't want to associate themselves with me.
I mean, that's just appalling. That is so appalling.
I mean, the whole reason why I bought my Free Speech Union membership was because someone who helped me edit that podcast with Charlie was told by a separate society that they must distance themselves from my work.
What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Connie Shaw's suspension from Leeds Student Radio raises critical questions about the balance between inclusivity and free speech in university settings. As she continues to fight against her suspension with support from free speech advocates, this case may influence discussions on how universities handle controversial opinions in academic discourse.
To discuss this now is Connie Shaw in the studio. Connie, thanks for joining us in the GB
Thank you for having me on.
Studio. What's happening? This is a bit of a mess, isn't it? So what have the universities said to you? Why have you been removed from that role?
Well, it's interesting because I haven't actually been told specifically what I've done, which has resulted in me being removed from my committee position, which was head of daytime. I started a podcast in September in which I interviewed Charlie Bentley-Astor, who's a detransitioner. I then also interviewed Graham Linehan, and I wrote an article for his Substack. And shortly after that, I was told that I had been suspended, and the university union started an investigation into me. And that very quickly became apparent to me that it was an interrogation of my gender-critical views rather than any sort of misconduct that I had been alleged.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated on our latest content.